What's going on, everybody? It's EricRayweather back here helping you take your game to the next level. And in today's video, I'm going to be going over everything you need to know about labbing in Madden 18. Now, if this is your first time checking out one of my videos and you want to improve your Madden game, go ahead and subscribe button below. Make sure to hit the bell icon so that you join the notification squad and never miss an upload. So what's going on, guys? Like I said, today I'm going to be going over everything you need to know about labbing. Not just for Madden 18, but this is just Madden in general. This is a video that can help you beyond this year, and I really enjoy making videos like this because, you know, I can always tell you a good defense to run or a good offensive play or show you a good offensive scheme, but it's better when I can make videos like this that can help you, you know, figure out how to do some of these things for yourself, because that's when you can truly, you know, take your game a step further. As my controller shuts off here, that's how you can really take your game further, when you can notice these things for yourself and notice how to find some of these things for yourself. So I'm going to just go over some very basic labbing tools and labbing practices that you want to take advantage of in practice mode to help take your game a step further. So first thing I want to talk about is on offense really quickly. So one thing you want to do is understand the importance of testing your plays out on the hash mark. So, you know, you can run your play in the middle of the field every time in practice mode, but something you have to realize is that when you're actually playing in game, you're not going to always be in the middle of the field. Typically, your ball is going to be spotted either on the left hash, right here, or it's going to be spotted on the right hash. So when you're practicing plays, you know, before I come, you know, like before I make a video even, you know, like if I'm labbing a play and I try it in game, you know, when I'm labbing a play, you know, I'll lab it a few times in the middle of the field, you know, just to kind of get the route combos down, kind of get a feel for what I want to do with the play, and then I test it out on both hash marks. And then after that, I test it out in game, because sometimes not everything translates over into the real game. It's just weird like that sometimes. Typically on offense, most things translate over. Defense sometimes can be weird in games. You really need to try it in game before you know for sure if it works. But when you're in practice mode, let's say you're practicing this play, and you know, the play's working great, and then you put it on the left hash mark and it's working great, and then you put it on the right hash mark and it doesn't really work on the right hash mark. Well, that's something you need to know, because that doesn't mean that the play is rendered useless. That means, okay, in game, you know, if you're in the middle of the field or if you're on the left hash mark, you can use that play, but you have to remember that, okay, when I'm on the right hash mark, this play doesn't work as well. And then there's some plays that don't work well in the middle of the field, but they work well on the hash marks. Those are things you need to know, so that when you're in game, you know, you might be in a situation where this is your first time actually running this play in game on a certain hash mark, and then you come to find out it doesn't work the same way. That's why it's good to know beforehand how it actually works. And it's also a good practice, and you don't have to even test it out in an online game. You can go into a play now game after you test it out in practice mode and test it, you know, in a game versus the computer, because in the real, even though it's not an online game, if you're playing against a computer, it's going to typically simulate what it's going to be like if you're in an online game. So that is number one thing that you need to definitely work on. Another big thing about practice mode on offense is not only practicing your offense inside the red zone, but, you know, practicing your 2-point conversions. You know, line it up on the 2-point conversion, you know, because it doesn't matter if you have the best plays in the world. Once you get this close to the end zone, the plays are not going to work the same. The routes aren't going to go as deep. The defense is going to be a lot more up in your face. You need to practice 2-point conversions, but also not that. You need to practice on the 5-yard line. You need to, you know, because this is a place where a lot of people get stuck. They kind of get to the 10 to 5-yard line, and then it's hard to get in. It's hard to run because the box is stacked every play, but it's hard to pass because the defenders have less ground to cover. So you need to go, you know, into your playbook and say, you know, what route combinations are going to work on this 5-yard line, and you need to practice it against every type of defensive look, you know, basic defensive look that you can get. Practice it against a cover 2, a cover 3, a cover 4, a man defense, and say, okay, if this one wide receiver gets open every time, I know that I have something I can go to. Now, yes, in game, a user defender may take that away, but you need to at least have something that you know that, you know, this needs to be user guarded. You know, something that the computer isn't just going to be able to stop just because we're so close to the end zone. So you need to practice on the 5-yard line. You need to practice on the 10-yard line. And I would say you also need to practice on the 15-yard line. Once you get a little bit further back, most plays should kind of break down the same way. The red zone in Madden, in real life, the red zone's 20 yards in inside. In Madden, it's more like 15 to 10 yard line because it's just so much harder to score in that part of the field. But when you're on the 20, it's not as hard to score. You still have just enough room to work with. So you need to make sure you're practicing that you have plays for the 15-yard line, for the 10-yard line, for the 5-yard line, for the 2-yard line. You need to make sure because it might be a different play for each 5 yards you move up. But if you're just getting into the red zone and you're saying, well, why can't I score? Well, that's because your plays, you're running the same plays that you run when you're at midfield or when you're on the other side of the field when you have all this open space to work with. But once you get down and the field becomes a lot more compressed, you need, in a lot of situations, totally different plays just specifically for that area of the field. You need different route combinations that'll be able to work for you. Now, another thing that you're going to want to do in practice mode is always use 2 controllers. If you don't have a second controller, get a second controller. You never want to practice just against stock computer defenses. You want to, okay, for example, I'm in the cover 4 drop show 2. If I only had one controller, I would be practicing versus this look every play against cover 4. But in game, almost nobody runs the cover 4 like this. Most times people base align the defense first of all, which changes the defense. It spreads the cornerbacks out further. It affects how they attack the ball. Another thing is most people don't leave these purple zones on the field when they play cover 4. They usually shade underneath to get hard flats, or they'll shade over top to get cloud flats. Either way, that's a completely different look than, let's reset the play here. I'm going to throw the ball away. Those looks are completely different than this look right here. It's not base aligned. You still have the purple zones on the field. Everything's kind of more compressed in. You're usually not going to see that in game. Same thing of like a Tampa 2, for instance. A lot of people, when they run Tampa 2, they don't run it like this. They take this mid-read zone and they drop him back like this. So you need 2 controllers because you need to practice against not only stock setups, but you need to practice against the exact setups that people use. Same thing if you want to lab against a blitz. You can't just call the blitz and then lab against it because no one's just running a stock blitz. They're making adjustments to the blitz. So if you call a crossfire blitz and say, all right, I'm going to practice against this, you're not practicing against the real crossfire blitz that you're going to see in game. You need to adjust the defense of how everybody runs it in game in order to know how to properly attack it. So, same thing of like if we go to a cover 2. Some people don't press cover 2, but some people do. So if you don't have 2 controllers, you're not going to be able to press your cover 2 because you might have a setup that beats standard cover 2, but it might not work against it once it's pressed. So you always need to take 2 controllers in the practice mode in order to really be able to simulate, the defense, which you're going to actually see in a real game. You can practice against the stock computer defense every play, but then you come in a real game and you say, well, why can't I beat it? Well, you can't beat it because that's not how people are running that play in game. They're making, even if it's just 1 or 2 adjustments, those 1 or 2 adjustments completely change how the defense reacts, how the zone defenders react. So it's not going to do you any good if you don't have a second controller. Like I said, especially for blitzes, because if you run a stock crossfire blitz, you're going to have both middle linebackers blitzing, but nobody runs crossfire blitzes like that in game. They only blitz one linebacker. They put the other guy in coverage, so you're not going against the true crossfire blitz. You're going against a crossfire blitz with less coverage on the field, which would be easier to beat, but that's not what you're going to see in a real game. Other things to consider when labbing, like if you're labbing a blitz, for instance. I made a whole video on this before. I'll actually link this in the description because I do feel it's a very good video. But like when you're labbing a blitz, you might call a blitz play that you think looks good, and you might run it stock, and it doesn't really work, so you give up on it. When you're labbing a blitz, you need to do every type of combination you can think of to get one of those blitzers to come in free. You might want to base a line and show blitz, or you might want to slide your line to the left or slide your line to the right, or slide your linebackers to the left or slide them to the right, or crash your defensive line up or crash them down. You might want to do 5 or 6 of these setups. It may take you a while to find a way to get this blitz to come in, but if you use a lot of different type of adjustments, usually you can get the blitz to come in. So you don't just run a blitz stock and then give up because it doesn't come in, because you might need to make 2 or 3 or 4 adjustments, and then it might actually become a really good blitz. But I have a whole video on that specifically, so I will link that in the description for those who haven't seen it. I do think it is one of my better videos this year, especially for people that are trying to figure out how to create their own blitzes in practice mode. I go through every step of the way and actually show you how it's done. Other than that, I would say, are there any other big important tips that I can think of? Running the ball. Definitely one thing to keep in mind with run plays is, as weird as it sounds, some run plays work really good running it to one side, but when you flip the play and you run it to the other side, it doesn't run as good. Like one thing that this really holds true with is a lot of counter runs. You want to practice these things in game. You might run the counter to the left a bunch of times and you're like, oh, this is a good run. And then you get in game and you might be in a situation where you're like, oh, the right side of the field looks very open. Let me flip this counter to the right. Most counters don't work well when you flip them to the strong side. You would know that if you tested it out in practice mode. So anytime you find a good run, flip it both ways, flip the formations. Also, try motioning wide receivers or tight ends to create different blocking on those runs, because you might be able to make the run better, but also you may find out that the run is only strong to one side of the field. Some runs are just weird like that in Madden where they work better. Typically, that usually happens to the left side of the field, where some runs are really, really good when you're running it left, but they don't really work as good when you run it to the right. So, if your run is stock, going to the right or stock going to the left, don't just practice it that way. You actually flip the run, flip the play, and see how it performs going to the other side of the field, because in game, you may be caught in a situation where you have to flip that run, and you need to know if it's going to be, if you have a chance of it being successful. So that's another tip that I would throw out there. Also, pay attention to stats and attributes. If you find a route that works really good, like for instance, Julio Jones right here. If I run a corner route to Julio Jones and he's just getting open every time, nothing can defend it, well, go put Mohamed Sanu there too, or go put Taylor Gabriel there too, who have less route running, and see if it works just as good with them, because some routes only work really good with high route running, but if you have a lower route running guy there, he doesn't get as open. So when you're in a game, you might be in a situation where you don't have a route runner as high as Julio Jones there, and then you come to find out you run it in game, oh, this isn't working. Always, try to see what the threshold is on certain plays. Certain routes might work with everybody, whereas certain routes might only work with an elite route runner, or some routes might only work with someone that's, so fast. It might be 92 plus speed, but if you have an 88 or an 89 speed guy there, he's not going to get separation. So you want to plug different players in, from elite, to, mid-tier players to even players that aren't very good at all, to see, because some routes will work with the worst wide receiver in the game. It's just a good route. And in some routes you can only work with the best wide receiver. So, same with running backs. You might have a really good, you might run a good toss play, but it's like, okay, I'm using a guy that's 94 speed. Let me try this out with a guy that's 90 speed. 90 speed's still pretty fast, but it might not work nearly as good. It might be one of those certain run plays you need the extra top end speed for it to really be effective. You want to plug, different tier guys into these spots, to see how it performs. Same with defense. If you're using a guy that has a 91 plus zone and he's jumping things, you're gonna be like, okay, this defense is good, but plug a different guy into that spot of the field, see how he reacts, because he might still react good as well, but it might leave a certain route more open, and you might think to yourself after that, okay, I definitely need a 91 zone guy here. If he's less than 91 zone, it won't work. Whereas I can put a guy on this side of the field in this spot. I can put a guy that's not 91 zone there, because this zone still plays good enough, relative to the play I'm trying to stop. So you always want to plug different guys into different spots to see what do you need to succeed. What is like the minimum threshold at this spot that you need for this route or this zone to succeed, or for this blitz to succeed. You might have a blitz that comes in great if you have a guy that has really good pursuit and, really good speed, but a slower guy with less pursuit gets picked up every time. Little things like that matter. There's a lot of blitzes in the game that you need a guy that has, in the 90s of pursuit for them to come around clean every time. But if you put a guy that has 82 pursuit there, which isn't horrible, but it's not great, he'll get picked up every time. So you might see somebody run a blitz and you're trying to mimic it and you're saying, well, why isn't it working? Look at your pursuit ratings or look at the speed ratings. Sometimes a player could be too fast for a blitz, that they get to the hole too fast before it really opens up. There's a lot of little things like that matter in the game. That's why you always want to plug different tier guys, different speed guys, different route running level guys, different zone coverage level guys into every spot and see, what is the minimum or what is the maximum I need here for this to work. So those are just a few labbing tips. Don't ever just go in practice mode and think basic. Always try to think, as outside of the box as possible. Always try to make sure you have all bases covered. If you test something out one way, test it out the other way. Test it out on both sides. Test it out different areas of the field. You want to make sure you have all bases covered so that when you're in a game, you already know the answer to everything. You already know, okay, right here I can do this, but right here I can't do that. These things are important, and that's the little things that make the best players simply the best, because they have all bases covered, and it's not hard to do. It just takes a little work and a little time. So hope you found this video helpful. If you did, as always, just drop a like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you guys next time.